All right, welcome to another PSL demo day. Today, we're excited to have Nikhil Woodruff of the UBI Center here. Nikhil is going to show us a new product he and Max Guinness have produced called PolicyEngine UK. It's a platform for analyzing tax and benefit policy in the United Kingdom, and kind of the first in hopefully a series of policy engines they'll launch to kind of democratize policy analysis. Nikhil, good to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just make a start. I'll share my screen. Okay, so PolicyEngine for the UK, but generally, is a tool that we built kind of just aiming to have this task of democratizing tax and benefit analysis and essentially broadening its reach as far as possible. So I'll go through all of this, but how I'm generally aiming for this to go is just a brief overview of exactly what PolicyEngine is and what we were trying to do by building it, and what kind of goals we're aiming to reach. And then just a run through of what it could look like if you wanted to have a go at using PolicyEngine to model your own reforms or see how someone else's reforms would affect you. And then finally, just a bit of background as to how it's actually doing all these things behind the scenes. So the model that it interfaces with Open Fiscal UK, and as well as what we'd like to fix and add in the future. So when the UBI Center or other think tank is analysing tax benefit reforms, whether it's UBI or not, you usually have to use a microsimulation model. And Open Fiscal UK was the open source microsimulation model that we've built for UK tax benefit policy. So this is an open source model that inputs microdata for thousands of households across the UK, and then simulates tax and benefit logic on those households to come up with changes to aggregate variables. And the model is open source, although the microdata sadly isn't. You'll need to be a UK academic, but there are ways of getting access to that. And the model is PSL catalogs. So you can find it if you want to have a look inside the source code at the PSL models organization on GitHub. And the model is at the moment interfaced with Python. So it's entirely written in Python using the same Open Fiscal framework as other countries which have these models, like Open Fiscal France or Open Fiscal Tunisia use. So you've got a consistent interface in Python, and this has its strengths and weaknesses. If you want to have a particularly procedural way of optimizing or creating a reform, then you can do this with Python. When we were looking at a large proposal for a UBI funded by flat tax reform in the UK in the blank slate UBI paper, we essentially simulated 40,000 different reforms in order to maximize some objective function. And we were really only able to do that because we could interface with the model in Python, where all of our other existing infrastructure and tools were built to do that as well. But Python has a learning curve. Not everyone that is interested in policy knows Python, and not everyone who knows Python is interested in policy. And it would be nice to try and capture the audience that exists outside of that intersection of people who already know Python and already are very interested in policy. So PolicyEngine is kind of the solution to that, we think. It's an attempt to combine user-friendliness, that people who just want to know how the tax benefit system affects them or want to see how a reform would affect the UK. People expect user-friendliness with those kinds of interfaces, and they want to be able to see graphical results and input values rather than having to code them themselves. And we also want to combine that with the policy microsimulation flexibility that you get with these tools that are industry standards in looking at policy analysis. So just kind of combining the microsimulation rigor with the user-friendly UI that's available to everyone. So with that said, I will actually show you what PolicyEngine looks like. So I think you can still see my screen, but what you're seeing here is PolicyEngine UK. So this is the first UK sort of model of PolicyEngine, and this is a web app that people can navigate onto, and they can do a few different things. And as you can see from this top level navigation, this web app kind of has four main parts to it. Firstly, it shows you all the different policy parameters that you can change in this app, whether that's on the tax side or whether it's on the benefit side, or even just something new like universal basic income. We've got a load of switches and policy parameters and sliders that you can change to specify what you think a good policy would look like. And then once you're done with that, you could look at the changes to the UK as a whole. And that will be things like the budgetary impacts, the change to poverty rates, and distributional outcomes across the entire population. And then if you're happy with the UK impacts, you might move on to your household. So you might want to give us some information about what is the makeup of your household, how many adults, how many children, what income do those people have, details about the household, like its region. And once we've got all that information, you can actually simulate the household impact of the reform for you. So that will give you changes like change to your disposable income, as well as looking at how that would all change if you decided to earn more or less, or had completely different earnings. So with that all said, I will go ahead and make up a reform and see how it looks in each of those views. So if you look on the left here, you can see a collapsible menu, which just structures all the parameters that we've got. So you've got the tax and the benefit side. Within tax, you've got income tax and national insurance. For those of you who are not familiar with the UK system, national insurance is a payroll tax applicable on earnings, employed and self-employed. And then income tax is the general tax on labour income and some capital income as well. So I might look at the personal allowance, which is kind of just like a standard deduction in the US. At the moment, that's £12,570 per year that's disregarded from income tax. I might just reduce that all the way to zero. And let's say I also want to make some changes to tax rates as well. I could increase the basic rate to 30% from 20%. And as I'm doing this, all my changes are being added up like it was a shopping cart checkout system on the right-hand side here. So let's say I wanted to look at some benefits as well. There are a few different benefits in the UK. You've got some universal benefits like the child benefits. You've got the state pension, which is paid to people over the age of 65. And then you've also got legacy benefits, which are currently being phased out, and this new universal credit benefit, which is being phased in to replace those. And the model takes account of who's on which benefits. So let's say I just wanted to abolish universal credit and just zero out any amounts that people were getting from that. I could do that, but that might actually leave some people worse off. So what I could also look at is a universal basic income. And for example, here I've got parameters that I can change if I wanted to give children, working age adults and senior citizens different UBI amounts. And I could specify which of those we wanted to give. But if I'm aiming for budget neutrality, then I would have to just keep guessing these amounts and seeing how much it costs and moving backwards. So what I can do is just click this switch, which is the auto UBI feature. And what this does is it just costs the current changes that we've made and will distribute that extra revenue to all of these groups proportionately to their size. So we can see that the tax changes that I've made give us about nearly £65 a week for every person in the UK, which is a moderate amount of a UBI, but we can see exactly how that looks. So I've got to the point where I'm happy with my reform and it's all summarized on the right for me, and I can move on to the next screen, which is going to tell me the UK impact. So what we can see here is that, okay, so the UBI, the auto UBI feature did work. The reform is pretty much budget neutral. It's not going to be exactly because we are rounding the UBI amounts to weekly amounts, but it will get us close. And then we can also see the poverty falls by 36%. And that's the average across all of the population. And we can see that most people come out ahead, 54% of people come out ahead, and 46% come out behind. So really, everyone is affected by this. And then we can see why exactly this costs a budget neutral amount. So you can see that the working age adult UBI was by far the most expensive provision in the reform, and the personal allowance was the biggest revenue raiser. And you can see exactly how this brought us to the final cost. And these aren't quite the order of simulation. We've reordered this to go from largest to smallest. The simulation is actually simulated in order of specification on the right here. So we can also take a closer look at the changes to poverty aggregates. So we can see here that the senior poverty rate was the one that reduced the most by nearly 60%. And there are a few ways we could justify that. I mean, universal credit isn't actually given to seniors. They get a different benefit. So they've kind of got an advantage there. And that's probably mostly why they've come out better at the poverty line and around it. And then we can also see the change to net income by income decile. So this is showing us the average change to disposable income, or your household's disposable income, by the decile that you're in. So the equivalized disposable income decile, equivalized being that it's adjusted for household size. This just shows us that the reform looks pretty progressive, with the biggest gains at the bottom, and that on average, the bottom 6 deciles come out ahead. And as you go into the 7th decile, you start to lose out from this reform. But of course, it's not going to be, I mean, this is just an average within each decile, and there might be some more complexity within those deciles that we're not seeing here. So if I scroll down to the next chart, I can see exactly what's happening inside these deciles. So we can see why the average is higher for lower income deciles. But we can also see that there's still some people in those lower income deciles that end up behind. That's 9% who lose more than 5% of their disposable income. And that kind of thing can be a bit of a deal breaker for these kinds of reforms. But you can also see that some people at the top come out much further ahead, even with the tax changes. And that's mainly a function of how many children they have in a household and other demographic factors like that. But overall, as you get richer, it's less likely that you'll come out ahead from this reform. So now that we've done that, maybe we want to see how this reform would affect our household, or any household that we decide to put in. So we can move on to the next screen. And this is going to take us to a page where we can input some information about the makeup and the properties of the individuals in our household. So you can specify details about you specifically, such as employment income, pension income, even capital income variables. And then you could also say add a child in your house and give maybe them some earnings. And then once we've specified this, so for example, I could say that I'm going to be an adult on median earnings, which is about £30,000 per year, and I have one child. There are some other variables that we might want to include in this. If we look at the family screen, we can see we've got some options about the types of benefits that we claim. Not everyone claims the benefits that they're entitled to, mainly because they don't know they're entitled to them, but also they might just not choose to claim them. And we give people that opportunity to tick that box here. There's also some more complexity because, for example, universal credit is being rolled out randomly in different geographical locations. So sometimes you'd need to know whether you're already claiming legacy benefits. And if you are, you'd stay on those rather than calculate your universal credit amounts. And here we're just going to say you're on the new universal credit benefit for simplicity. But you could also change household characteristics like the region of the UK that you're in. I am actually in the southeast, so I don't need to change that. But once we're done with that screen, and at any point we can share the link to this. So you can see my address bar and you can see that it's got all of the details of the policy in here. it doesn't have any details about the individual situation that I've put in here. So we could share this link and have it essentially point to a form that people could type in their information and see how your particular proposal form would affect them. So if I'm happy with this situation that I've entered in here and I want to see how it affects this hypothetical household, then I can simulate the situation for them. And what this tells me is that the annual disposable income for this household is going to be better off because of this reform. And it's going to be about £1,140 better off, which is a gain of 5%. And then we can see, just like the funding waterfall that we saw for the UK impact, we can see why that is. So it's mostly half and half, the child UBI and the adult UBI. But then the adult UBI tends to be wiped out mostly by the personal allowance, that's minus £3,000. And then also the basic rate eats into that a bit more, but you end up with a gain of over £1,000. And then let's say we wanted to forget that we said this household earned £30,000 a year, and we wanted to figure out what this would change to if they earn different amounts. So we could look at the next chart, which is going to tell us exactly how your disposable income is going to change as your employment income changes in both the baseline and reform scenarios. So we can see here that actually we're better off here, but if you were 10 grand a year richer in your employment income, you'd actually start to come out behind. And it's common for these kinds of reforms to have not just one break-even point, but maybe several. And this just gives the user a view into exactly where they are and what their situation is heading to if they decide to change their income. So we can also look at not just the absolute amount, but also the changes to effective marginal tax rates, which is essentially the inverse derivative of this graph. And just for a bit of context, this is showing us the effective marginal tax rate, taking into account taxes and benefits equally. So what you can see here is the fact that this looks very chaotic. The income tax and national insurance systems do rise with employment income, so those rates are monotonically rising. But of course, you've got things that complicate it. So you will start within the personal allowance, and then you'll start having your universal credit amount reduced at 63%, and that will only get higher as you start being taxed as well, eventually reaching about 75%. And then you'll land on the basic rate and the main rate of national insurance, which is 20 plus 12. Then you'll start to get your child benefits withdrawn between 50 grand and 60 grand, which is going to create a weird 53% MTR. And then finally, you'll end up with your personal allowance, the standard deduction, being means tested away, creating a 60% income tax MTR. So this is definitely not monotonic, but we can see how it would change with this reform. So this becomes a lot flatter. You've got, for example, no longer the massive increase to marginal tax rates provided by universal credit because it doesn't exist anymore. And you also haven't got this 60% MTR because the personal allowance has been reduced, so there's nothing to means test away. And this may look a lot closer to now, more like a 40% flat tax, but hopefully this provides some additional clarification because quite a lot of the time the benefit MTRs aren't really as visible as the marginal tax rates. So with that, that would be the end of the charts that the individual can look at. And what they could do is they could see where they want to go from here. You might decide, okay, maybe I want to change the policy and see how that MTR graph would change if I kept universal credit in. Or maybe they want to go back to the population results or change something about their household. And then finally, they could share a link or share a link on Twitter or any of those social media functions. So that is pretty much the end of the PolicyEngine UK journey that the user would be going on. if anyone has anything that didn't look clear, feel free to interrupt me. But otherwise, I'll go back to how it actually worked. Okay, so.
Hey, can I ask you a question, Nikhil? This is Rick Evans.
Go ahead.
So is everything on that PolicyEngine pre-computed?
So at the moment, that example was, and in reality, it takes about 20 seconds. But because every reform that you put into it is then cached and served for future users, then yes.
Well, I mean, there's probably thousands and millions of permutations of all the variables, right? So you're not, are you really saving those and trying to just interpolate between those so it's pre-computed, or are you, it seems like you're really just running it in the background, not pre-computed then.
Yeah, so I mean, let's say I wanted to, I mean, I could go back and let's say I'm going to change it and have 35%. And maybe I'll keep universal credit in, and I can see how that changed. The time that it takes to run is usually proportional to how many reforms you got in there. So if you've got 10 reforms, it will take about 50 seconds. But if you're just changing one thing, it'll take about 5 seconds.
But you are running it. That's my question. Is if you change it, that little timing circle is saying that this is running on the full OpenFisca UK model is running in the background behind this web application. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we do we can keep the baseline simulation because that's not going to change. What we need to do when a new simulation comes in is just create the reform object from the parameters, create the simulation, calculate disposable incomes, and then just plug those into the charts and return those results. So yeah, but the micro simulation model is running every time you run a new reform.
But if it's a reform that's been run in the past by some other user or yourself, it's cached and that basically serves it instantly.
So it's going to, so that you're keeping track of, because that's almost more intensive a database search than running the model is my guess, of trying to find if somebody's exact parameterization is something that's already been run. Is that something, is that what you're really doing?
Yeah, so I mean, when we cache it, we are essentially caching. I mean, you've got these 5 parameters. Of course, as we add more parameters, yeah, it's going to get pretty complex.
Oh, so you've only got 5 parameter choices here. This is not, so you can't. There's not the full functionality of the model available through the web app. Is that?
We've got more than 5 in this screen, and I could keep adding all of these parameters. We haven't got all of the parameters that you'd be able to change in the Python interface, purely because we need to add nice descriptions and documentation for all of those on a user interface. But
it's basically caching, like the URL captures all the reform parameters that are being adjusted. So the file that the cache is keyed on is essentially the URL, right?
Yeah.
So that's how the database lookup works. It's also cached based on the version of the app. So if we change something, then it effectively will recalculate everything.
That's right.
Another question for you, Nikhil, is this, so you mentioned that the OpenFisca UK model, the data may not be available to everybody, or at least a particular version of the data that can be used in the model. What data is this run on when you do the UK impact?
Yeah, so this is run on our server, which we compute the aggregate variables from. We can't publish the microdata, but this is run on the Founding Resources survey.
Okay, great. And then one more question, kind of relating to pre-computing things, but I thought it was really neat how you did the auto UBI, and that was instantaneous, but it seems like the revenue that determines the auto UBI is a calculation of the reform specified. So how is that done so quickly?
So yeah, I mean, the reason that primarily the reason that the population results take so much longer than auto UBI is because when we're simulating the population, we really need to run a micro simulation of every individual reform. One micro simulation takes about 5 seconds. So if we just have to do one, it's a lot quicker than doing 6 or 7.
But it also caches the auto UBI results, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely.
Wait, but I mean, the auto UBI though, did that not depend upon everything you specified in your plan, right? Because all of those things up to the auto UBI button would determine how much revenue there would be relative to the baseline, which is what you're kind of appropriating out or apportioning out, I guess, for the auto UBI.
Yeah, so
wrong?
if I can actually change tabs to the population results, then what I can see is that, well, if you look here, each bar on here has to be run as a micro simulation of all of the reforms up to that point. So it still is a lot more work to do this whole funding waterfall, which is taking up most of the time here, compared to we just have to do one micro simulation. So did that answer your question?
Okay, yeah. So I see how you're stacking the reforms to kind of do this, but I guess my question was just on that input page, like you compute the auto UBI. It looks like before you click to do the UK population results, but it seems like you need the UK population results for the auto UBI.
Yeah,
so you're saying you just need one run through the model, so that just happened as you clicked auto UBI.
Yeah,
so you don't need to stack.
I'm kind of cheating here because when I click this auto UBI button, it is actually sending a request to the same API, which is saying, give me the UBI amounts for this policy reform. So it is still going through OpenVisca UK. It's just being a bit sneaky about it.
Yeah, impressive how quickly it runs there, though.
And then for the micro data, are there any do you have any concerns about like differencing attacks? Maybe not with these parameters, but as you add more parameters, then people can back out the data by. Yeah,
so I mean, we've kept the parameters fairly general for this. I don't think yeah, we'd look carefully before adding just, I mean, if we added every parameter, then potentially that could introduce something, but we're just trying to keep it high level at the moment and returning those aggregates.
Okay.
There is also a product, the UK mod group has a similar web app, but they just put it out, and I don't think they're doing any blurring. So yeah, I guess you could probably adjust the income tax bracket thresholds very specifically to hone in on individuals, but it doesn't seem like others are too concerned about that right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. I think we might be out of time, but if you like, I could do a brief explanation of what we're planning to improve in the future, or as well as how it works. But
it'd be great. Go ahead with that, Nikhil. Yeah.
Sorry?
I said that'd be great. Go ahead with that, Nikhil. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I mean, as we've said, this is basically interfacing with OpenVisca UK. So the UK impact page and actually that part of the policy page with the auto UBI feature is sending a request to OpenVisca UK, and OpenVisca UK is applying with the charts and the figures needed for that. And then also we've got a separate package called OpenVisca UK data, and that's just keeping track of the microdata and organizing that. So if you wanted to use a different data set, it would just involve swapping out that data set, and that would all just fit into the model nicely. But the web app keeps track of all the policy and household information. So those are passed through with every step, of course. And the PolicyEngine API that you could actually use for things other than PolicyEngine, that's going to be the thing that calculates the figures and charts that you see there. All the charts are actually calculated on the server side, which I think is slightly new. But yeah, so how PolicyEngine calculates these changes is just through the traditional microsimulation method. We load up all the households in the family resources survey, load the policy parameters and logic that we've programmed into OpenFiscal UK. We calculate taxes, the benefits, disposable incomes, and then do the same thing, but with the reform applies to those parameters and logic. And then we can just calculate the changes to aggregates and decile group changes and intradecile aspects there. But of course, we don't include behavioral responses here. So this is, there's more information on this in the FAQ, but we're not looking at the macroeconomic effects because it's just a static model, although that would be nice. And we're also working on a bunch of different features to make this better. So mostly just making it as fast as possible. That seems like it would be pretty helpful. And then, of course, looking at more policy parameters within the constraints that we have. And also giving users, organizations, the ability to share their reforms, and also for users to be able to, say, compare two different reforms in that population view or in the individual view. Also having a go at making the navigation a bit friendlier, so making it a bit more maybe intuitive if you just want to go exactly to a specific section. And then looking at maybe we want to see different charts, different kinds of results, and on the population and household level for that. So maybe we want to see the percentage changes to decile aggregates and things like that, or changes by family type. As well as that, of course, more validation is always a good thing. So making sure we do publish validation statistics compared to external and other microsimulation models. But also looking at things like more unit tests, which we have some already, but just continuing to expand that. And then finally, looking at more forms that we can add here. We've published research on land value tax in the past, so we could probably integrate that and the wealth tax into the model and make sure those features can be used by the users. And then also looking at other things like carbon tax. So we'd have to integrate other data sets there. And then, of course, updating policy when the law changes. There's things like universal credit is going to be reduced quite substantially very soon. So we want to add that change in. And of course, anything else that we receive in feedback or recommendations is all very welcome. And yeah, we'd be pretty keen for that kind of stuff. But with that, I'll leave it there. So thank you for listening.
Nikhil, thanks a lot. And before we go, any questions from the audience here or comments for Nikhil?
Yeah, I could throw one in. What about putting other models on this platform? How open to that are you, and how difficult would that be?
I think we built it for OpenFiscal UK, but I think there's definitely scope for adding other models. I mean, especially because we're planning to make this kind of general to OpenFiscal US later on. But yeah, there's definitely potential, I think.
I think we are focused on the microsimulation angle, providing, I think a focused user experience where people can see the impact of policy tax and benefit reforms on the population and their household. But to the extent that other models like OGUSA can help make those estimates more refined, I think that would be pretty awesome to put together. Seems like a hard problem, but yeah. At least like labor supply responses is on the roadmap, for example.
I mean, it's not it's really just computing time is the only difference, right? Otherwise, it's just a model that runs in the background on a server.
Yeah, and tying it to microdata and individuals and things like that. So.
Well, Nikhil, it's a great product. I love the aesthetics and the speed with which things are computed. Hope everybody checks it out at PolicyEngine.org. Nikhil, thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Take care. We'll see you next time.